the important thing to recognize is in analyzing the game, specifically this game, the game that I've specifically designed for educational purposes, it's imperative to recognize that I can't make assessments of what my choices should be until I recognize what I need as an acceptable outcome. For me, player one in this game, this is an unacceptable outcome. So I recognize that there is no way, right? I recognize that there is no way that I can de-escalate the conflict, right? Because it's potentially going to lead to me being a sucker. Once I recognize this, my path starts to get determined, and then I just make my adjustments based on that initial decision. This is sort of like conceptually how strategy at a very, very rudimentary level unfolds. And that's all I'm trying to do, is give you a rudimentary understanding, and it's not that rudimentary actually, but a rudimentary understanding of sort of strategic planning in warfare. Now, next thing to recognize are three complications in analyzing state commitment, this idea of commitment. So complications. Complications. Alright, that's supposed to be number 3. Alright, the first complication, and I'm going to take a little bit of time, not too much time, but a little bit of time on this. The first complication is commitment is compromised if other states don't acknowledge the threat. Commitment is compromised if other states don't acknowledge the threat. And this is basically the failure to follow through with the threat. This is the example of the boy who cried wolf, right? Boy cries wolf, there's no wolf, boy cries wolf, there's no wolf, boy cries wolf. States are not going to take you seriously if you keep on saying we're going to attack, we're going to attack, we're going to attack, and you never attack, right? If you say you're going to attack, you need to attack. If you say you're not going to attack, maybe don't say anything or don't attack, right? But there needs to be a recognition that your commitments, your action is made imperfect if you don't follow through with what you said you would do. Like if you don't follow through with your posturing, the action at a decision node becomes imperfect, and your credibility is undermined. So that when you tell them that you're going to escalate the conflict, they already know that you're not, and you're going to de-escalate it. So they're already thinking about making you a sucker, right? Oh, the boy said he's going to escalate, but the wolf is coming. The wolf is coming. The boy said the wolf is coming, but I know the wolf isn't coming, right? So what ends up happening is there's an opportunity now for me to demonstrate that you're not serious, right? That you're not serious about the conflict. That your talk is cheap in a sense, like that colloquial sense. Talk is cheap. That's sort of capturing that idea in a very general sense. The second complication obviously the first complication, people don't take you seriously. That's basically what that means. Second complication, commitment is compromised if power transition, wherein the new regime fails to ensure the old regime that it will not completely destroy the political status quo. What in the world does that mean? Okay, I spoke before about, and I have it embedded in the earlier parts of this PDF, which you can access and download, and obviously I've updated it to incorporate this new discussion. But in my video on political obstructionism, you have sort of a paradigm shift between parties A and B, right? And probably should be the other way around. Parties A and B. And Party A represents the status quo. Party B represents the new oppositional force, right? Insofar as the new oppositional force is encroaching, this state of affairs is a state of encroachment. Right? Insofar as B is encroaching on A, there's an actual theoretical paradigm that explains this process, just one of many theoretical paradigms, and it's power transition theory, as I think I labeled, as I labeled here, right? So power transition theory talks about this. What ends up happening, once A recognizes that it's inevitable that B, now if they don't recognize the inevitability, you're just going to have conflict, but once A recognizes that it is inevitable that B is going to subsume A and take complete power, A is going to want to de-escalate the conflict, right? To make the transition easier. A is going to want some level of assurance that once B, since it's inevitable that you guys are going to take control, we just want some level of assurance that when you take control, you're not going to dismantle the entire structure that we spent all this time building, right? And if B is smart as a strategic action, B would say, oh, sure, when we get in power, we'll make sure we don't dismantle all of the power structures that you have. Use that as a ploy to get them to sort of drop their guard and then destroy everything that they put into place. That's what I would do. That's what I would, if I were advising, that's what I would say we should do, right? I know that's bad and there might be some moral issues, but, you know, I'm not an ethicist at all. In war games, you gotta do what you need to do in order to get the outcomes that you want, right? So, what power transition theory is saying, and one complication to this, is a recognition that, as it said, commitment is compromised in power transition, wherein the new regime, B, fails to ensure the old regime that it will not completely destroy the political status quo, right? You fail to tell me that you're not going to destroy, and therefore I'm going to flex. I'm going to defend, because I think that you're going to destroy everything, right? You're not going to keep in place some of the structures that I've worked so hard generationally to impose or to instantiate. Well, I'm going to fight you harder, right? So you failed. If you are the new opposition, what you do is you play to the crowd. Oh, no, sure. When we get in power, yeah, you can keep all your crap. It'll be there. Sure, no problem. Not a problem. But you pitch it like you make it believable, right? Here's why we're going to do it, because it's important, blah, 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 da, 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 da. They back down, they buy it. They buy that, their structures will still be in place once you assume this inevitable power. As soon as you get in power, you deconstruct all that, right? You destroy it all. I know that's being gross. That's definitely against a lot of the things that Paulo Freire discusses. Freire talks specifically about this relationship. Imagine that this is the oppressor. Imagine this is the oppressed. The oppressed now become the oppressor, and then in becoming the oppressor, oppress those who oppressed them previously. I'm not saying that, and the theory is not necessarily talking about that, though that's an application of this. This is more about the actual structure, right? The actual political structure in place. So it might be a transition from democracy to liberal democracy. It might be a transition from a democratic state to libertarian state, or what have you, right? It's that. But there are obviously applications outside of political structures proper. So I just wanted to say that. And then lastly, the last complication is perfection allows us to test the credibility of commitment within the game, right? As we've seen, this notion of perfection allows us to test how credible the decision-making abilities of the particular player is at any node within the game, right? Based on previous historical analysis, when State 1 says they are going to escalate, we've seen that there has been 92% chance that they actually escalate. Here we find ourselves in a conflict with State 1, and State 1 has said that they're going to escalate. I would infer that they probably are going to escalate, assuming that that's what they're going to do, and that's what they should do, right? Then we recognize that their action is perfect if and only if they actually escalate, right? So what we do is we assume that they're going to act, parties to the conflict are going to act in their best interest, meaning that all actions will be perfect actions, to be technical. Insofar as I recognize that that's what they should do, I have to adjust my strategic planning, assuming that their actions are going to be perfect actions. So if it's the case that I think that they're going to escalate, and I don't want to, for whatever reasons, this state of affairs might not be acceptable, then I might have to back down, right? If I recognize that they're going to escalate, but their escalation might actually destroy my people, like it's going to be like genocidal escalation, then my best action might be sort of defensive response. I escalate as well as a mode of defense. A lot of different ways to interpret this, but you get the idea. So the first thing that we do is we look at the idea of perfection, what is in their best interest. We use that idea of perfection to inform how we respond. We don't know, remember, atemporally, we might not know what they're going to do, but we have a strategic plan that says, if it's the case that we recognize they escalate, then here's what we ought to do because ... Okay, so that's important. The role of information is important in a game theory. Obviously, information is how you win the game, right? You use the information that you have accessible to you, and there's many, many different ways to really, really complicate this game. I'm not going to get too complicated in it. I want to keep it sort of simple. But with respect to information, the amount of information that you have in a game maximizes the efficiency, the effectiveness with which you play the game.